Hey everyone, and welcome back to episode 5 of AAPI History. My name is Shreya Joshi, and I'm a youth intern at Monsoon. Today, we're going to cover the Asian American Civil Rights Movement, secret wars, and Asian American representation in the government. Let's start off by talking about a not-so-secret war, specifically the Vietnam War in the 1950s. The US officially entered Vietnam in 1954, but the conflict there had been ongoing. Prior to official involvement, though, the CIA had been intervening, and by this time, over 100,000 people were arrested, tortured, or executed. You see, thinking the rest of Southeast Asia would become communist, which was/is enemy ideology number one, the US waged a bombing campaign on North Vietnam that extended into both Cambodia and Laos. US General Westmoreland waged a war of attrition, i.e., to win, he believed the US must kill as many enemy soldiers as possible instead of simply capturing land. The war was not wanted by many American soldiers. There were over 2,700,000 troops deployed, and over 500,000 deserted. Many returned with PTSD, as well as high rates of substance abuse. And the war was also very unpopular in the public's eyes. At home, they were constantly bombarded by the terrible images of war by the media. On April 26, 1968, Kiyoshi Kuromiya staged a protest about napalm gas with some friends at the University of Pennsylvania. Kuromiya was born in a Japanese internment camp and was a lifelong activist, close with MLK Jr. He announced that a dog would be burned alive on the steps of the UPenn library. Thousands showed up to protest, only to be handed a note that said, "Congratulations on your anti-napalm protest. You saved the life of a dog." Now, how about saving the lives of tens of thousands of people in Vietnam? And on November 15th, over 250,000 people protested the war in DC. During this time, though, a secret war was happening too. The Lao Civil War, or what is more commonly referred to as the Secret War, was a battle between the US and Laos between 1964 to 1973. Over the span of 9 years, 270 million bombs were dropped on Laos, which equals a plane load of bombs every 8 minutes for 24 hours a day. Thousands of Laos civilians were displaced, often seeking refuge in the country that was dropping the bombs. And about 50,000 people were killed. Since then, the US has spent $130 million to clean up and restore Laos, but many are still dealing with the legacy left behind. Back home, the civil rights movement was fully in motion. Alongside African American civil rights, the Asian civil rights movement started too. It was actually this movement that facilitated the term Asian American, which was coined by activist Yuji Ichioka. This movement brought together many people from a variety of Asian backgrounds to protest against oppressive structures, such as neo-imperialism and the racism ingrained in societal and legal structures. It also sought to provide social services, from healthcare to housing, to those who couldn't afford them. One of the structures protested was voter suppression. See, until about 1952, naturalization laws were only accessible to white persons of good moral character or persons with African descent. This effectively excluded all API and Latinx immigrants from voting. Even after these restrictions were lifted, voter suppression took the form of unpassable literacy tests, gerrymandering, and other forms of identification. Another structure being protested was police brutality. Most people are under the impression that since Asian people have always been the model minority, they're exempt from structures like police brutality. However, this isn't the case. Historically, tensions have existed between Asian people and the police. On April 26, 1975, police officers stripped and beat a young Asian man named Peter Yu. His crime? He had seen police officers beating a 15-year-old Asian kid for a traffic violation, and Peter had voiced his concern. He was beaten then and there, taken to the police precinct, stripped and beaten again on the charges of resisting arrest. Virtually every shop in NYC's Chinatown closed, with a sign that said, "Closed to resist police brutality." And over 20,000 people showed up to protest. A new generation had decided that this is our country. We have rights, and we'll fight for them. The fight for rights and representation, though, had been happening across the board. In 1956, Dilip Singh Sandh was elected to the US Congress. Referred to as the judge or the peacemaker, Dilip Singh Sandh was the first Asian, the first Indian American, and the first Sikh or Sikh to be elected. Sandh organized a bill in favor of allowing Indians to become naturalized American citizens, which Congress approved in 1946. The Luce Seller Act allowed for a strict quota of 100 Filipinos and 100 Indians to immigrate each year, but they could become naturalized citizens. Despite all the racism he faced, Sandh ran for his home district in 1956 and won the nomination. He's famous for his part in civil rights legislature. In 1964, Patsy Takemoto Mink became the very first Asian American woman and woman of color to be elected to the US Congress. She fought for specific causes, like bilingual education, affordable childcare, and more. She also played a large part in the writing and passing of multiple bills, like Title IX, the Women's Educational Equity Act, and the Early Childhood Education Act. Bills pass, restrictions are lifted, and restrictions are put in place. The wheel turns, but is anything ever new? Are there still instances of voter suppression? Are there still instances of abuses of power? And are there still instances of war tactics that are violations of human rights? The most important question, though, is, do we remember why we fought against them? Do we remember why we decided we had rights and we were entitled to them, that all humans are? See, both in history and today, apathy to injustice fuels injustice itself. In history, people cared enough to advocate for themselves so they could make a difference. So, on the backs of giants, do we care enough today to continue to fight the good fight? We at Monsoon certainly hope so. Thanks for watching, and see you next time for the last time.